Actually, we were supposed to start at 11 when the ruling of the High Court of Justice was issued. I just saw the ruling now. People ask me what my response was. My response is that today at 6 p.m. the committee will convene for its third meeting to talk about the national security or security service law, and there's nothing new in the ruling. I even knew before the ruling that there was a war going on in Israel. Of course, I knew that there was a shortage of personnel in the IDF, significant shortage. I don't think anybody is any longer talking about a smart and a small and smart army, but now we need to try and aim for agreement. How in practice can the IDF start drafting population groups that have not served significantly until now, that did not share the burden, and that's why I'm sorry, sir, you cannot terrorize all the people here and manage this on your own. You've spoken, I've given you the opportunity to speak, I like you, but you cannot in such a manner take over an entire conference. I would like to ask you, with all due respect, to stop interrupting. It's becoming intolerable. We have tremendous identification with you and the hostages, and I've known you for quite some time, and I truly love you, but you cannot take over and ruin an entire conference. The chair of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee, what he says here is not important just to the people sitting in this hall. This is being live streamed, and I'd like to ask you to stop heckling from now on until the end of this interview. We cannot have one person taking over. I'm sorry, this is even harming you, and I'd like to ask you, you've spoken, and now please stop interrupting. Thank you very much. I truly thank you and appreciate you, and I love you. Go ahead, please. The committee will continue to discuss and hopefully will manage to reach the wording. As for the principles, I don't think I'm going to surprise you. I've said this at the beginning of the discussions. I would like to hear what are the demands and the needs of the IDF. It's not that I don't know, but I'd like to hear that from the Chief of General Staff or the head of adjutancy. What are the real needs? Another thing I'd like to hear is how are they preparing to do it. I don't want to hear a warning like what the ruling was. Everybody needs to be drafted. Oh, okay, but what do I say to reservists who did reserve duty for 160 days and now he's received another call-up notification? I'd like to say to that reservist and their wives come to me and they say we can't take it anymore. In a month or two or more people will join and they'll be ready for action in a matter of several months. But now I can at least promise that next year he'll have to do less reserve duty. I can tell the mother of a conscript soldier that instead of a letter of discharge, they receive a call-up for reserve duty the day they finish their service. I can tell them that next year there will be others to share the burden. And that's the direction in the committee, and there is a majority for that. And when people asked yesterday what's the position of the ultra-Orthodox parties, I said this, it's on the record, it's on the air. I am not chasing anyone. I'm not going to chase any other party. The last time I checked, the ultra-Orthodox parties don't have a majority in the Knesset. Do you know why things never happen? Because people always have, you know, improvements. They always know what's best, what needs to be done, what hasn't been done, with slogans and demagogy. But excuse me, if the approach is practical regarding the demands, the requirements of the State of Israel, and not just the security establishment, there will be true contribution to sharing the burden. And and for the people who have not just contributed over the past 8 months, but for many years now. Maybe the general population in Israel doesn't know this, but the chair of the Knesset Committee for Foreign Affairs and Security, and Yuli, whom I know, has a unique vantage. He knows both what the threats over Israel are. I think that the late Prime Minister Sharon once said, wow, now I'm in the cabinet and I know less than what I knew in the subcommittee for Intel Affairs. Yes, I agree. I was also on that committee. And now, as the chair of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee and the coordinator of the subcommittee, the security establishment that the committee is responsible for, he's exposed to all the knowledge. If there's one person who knows what are the threats over Israel, that's the chair of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee, Yuli. And if we talk about the threat, had we spoken a year ago, we did speak a year ago, and then the situation was very different. What do we look like? What's the situation with the threats? What the preparedness? Of course, do not divulge any military secrets. And how does that come together with the historic occasion that you're in charge of? It's very important, because it's important not to turn it into an AWOL law, a law of abandoning their responsibility, because what they need to do now is serve this country. Thank you. First of all, I truly agree with what you said at the end, and once again, I'd like to say there are two types of Israeli bluffs. One type of Israeli bluff, Israel bluff, is to say, yeah, this year we're going to recruit 20 years, next year 30 years, the year after 40 years. That's Israel bluff. And another kind of bluff is to say we're going to recruit everyone tomorrow. It's the same bluff, but maybe the constituency likes to hear that. I also think that this is a historic moment, and I truly hope that we'll be able to do so. I don't have all the power. I don't have 61 votes in the Knesset. I don't intend to strike political deals. I'll submit a good bill according to the needs that could truly lead towards an equal burden, and people can choose based on their consciousness how they vote, not according to the coalitionary discipline or the party line. As for the map of threats, I've started saying this, and don't play naive, because you're familiar with it just as well as I am, if not even more familiar. But I've said that all the talk about a small and smart army that's behind us, it's completely obvious that the military, as far as its request for Orbat and personnel, has a very just demand. Where do we see that? I haven't heard that there's a major shortage of soldiers in the special units that do the wonderful and amazing things, sometimes even releasing hostages when that works out, and special ops both in the north and the south. But there are certain tasks where there's a lot of personnel required, and the threats, if we're talking about the change in the map of threats, they're relatively new. I'd like to say something. Anybody who bought in the Sharon region, not far from here, a nice detached home with a lawn and a backyard and a dog and everything, the last thing they ever thought about are security threats. They simply wanted to improve their quality of life with a nice home with a lawn and neighbors. But today the seam line, the border area with Tulkarem and other places, it's a real threat. So we need a lot of personnel. People don't all have to be, you know, top-notch commando fighters, but they need to go through some basic training to receive an M16 to be able to patrol and be ready. These are the needs related directly to the conscription law, and this will make better forces available. I don't want to see the Golani or Givati brigades there. We need people who can handle simpler missions. As for the general map of threats, like you said, not to divulge secrets, so I don't think that this will be news to the people sitting here. They're probably all following the news, but every day that passes in the north, let's say 2 or 3 months ago, had you interviewed me, I would have said in contrast to what's popular to say, maybe there is still a chance to reach some kind of an agreement with the pressure of the French or Amos Gilead, and to get a certain pause or lull and make sure that the Hezbollah is driven far enough from the border. But I think with every day that passes, the chances for that are reduced. The escalation are quite visible. You don't need to be a great military expert to see that. I was along the northern border yesterday, and I met with mayors and their local residents and the IDF. Look, the mood is not that they'll all come back tomorrow if only we achieve an agreement. I think that we'll need to reach some kind of a closure to the operations in the north, because we're not going to fight on two fronts, and we will free ourselves up to handle the Hezbollah and anybody else who doesn't allow the residents of the north to return to their homes, because no proper functional country can allow such regions to be evacuated for so long. So that's the map, and of course the head of the snake is Iran. Obviously they have devised a very good apparatus of their proxies along our borders, and that leads us to the next topic, which is Israel's international status, which is a very important thing. Sometimes I make a comparison. I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was in the peace summit on the war on in Ukraine, and somebody said, you know, not much came out of it, nothing practical came out of it. And I said, well, you know, as an Israeli, I definitely want to see, I think it was approximately 70 heads of states or prime ministers, and in addition 30 delegations on ministerial levels, and identify with us. I wish we would have that, even if nothing comes out of it. So it's very important to mobilize a comprehensive world public opinion, and not to just ask if we have the right missiles. Warning letters were sent yesterday by the Commission of Inquiry on the submarine. I don't want to ask on the personal aspect, but what comes out there, that there were certain flaws in the work process and how to plan. You've mentioned that. We're preparing here for some very powerful threats, even though they're not new. Do you intend to revisit, re-examine the entire security concept? And what especially grabbed my attention in the notes, I'm ignoring what issue was lettered to whom, but the issue that comes up here, that there's something truly flawed in the system. And let's say a submarine. A submarine is something very important, definitely, but every submarine costs 2 billion shekels to the Israeli taxpayer. You can invest it in other places, in the army, in the ground forces. So are you planning anything on that general level or a higher level? Look, one thing that is well known, that the State of Israel doesn't have any official national security concept document. The U.S., for example, publishes its security concept once a year. Not that every time there's something completely new there, but it shows you where they place an emphasis, what they wish to pay attention to. Maybe it's high time. Gadi Eisenkot, who's a member of the committee, tells me that there were some attempts to write such a document in the past. We've started compiling some materials. We've spoken with him and with others. Right now, as long as there is no such a document, we're trying to check anything that's expensive, like you said, when in money terms and procurement, and which is a long-standing commitment, long-term commitment. For example, I'm not going to get into the content of the discussions, but to discuss more squadrons, new squadrons. We had a very serious discussion on that, because right now I haven't decided yet, and I'm not going to say it on the stage anyhow whether or not we need it, but we need to see what are the needs, because it's a commitment for many years into the future, a commitment of the security budget, and we need to check once again I'm going back to the same point. Sometimes, as we've seen, low-tech can beat high-tech, so we need to prepare for that option as well. Your position is important, even though I can tell you what it is before you speak. What do you have to say about the U.S. in the context of Israel's national security at the backdrop of certain things that have been said? Your clarification about the importance of these relations is very important because you have a very unique vantage point. I think that this relationship is very, very important. This is not an easy or simple situation. An election year is an election year, and you have politicians in the U.S. as well, and it's very difficult for politicians in an election year to see something that's happening thousands of miles away from their country, when what's at stake is whether they or their party or their administration are going to continue to remain in power. But we need to maintain the dialogue in every possible way, as you've alluded to. I do know what's the content of these meetings, what comes up, and now the Minister of Defense is there about to visit his journey there, and with all the meetings he held, and we also meet with our counterparts, and there are about 10 counterparts for my position, because they have various committees, 5 in the Congress, 5 in the Senate, so we're in dialogue, and I think that there are 2 things that are very important to mention. One is direct assistance to the State of Israel according to our needs in these areas that unfortunately have now become part of public discourse, and it's a shame. But even moreover, and I don't think that we've done enough work on this topic in recent years, and that's to show that in the polarized world that we see there is no illusion. I think that we're come out of the illusion that we can be in several poles. We need unequivocally to be on the side of the good guys, and I'm saying this, I'm using this term unabashedly, and Russia, I don't think Russia wants to obliterate the State of Israel. That's not too urgent, but the war in Ukraine is very important to them. The Iranians, they couldn't care less about the Ukraine, but what they want is to destroy the Zionist entity, and they're rushing to get there. But on this axis, they'll always help each other, as we see. But on the other side, regretfully, each country has its own theory. You've seen it with the Congress now. Half of them want to give assistance to Israel and not to the Ukraine, and the other half wants the exact opposite. And I think the most important task is to formulate the evil of goodness, the axis of goodness, and not the axis of evil in Israel. Even we need to pay a tactical price. It's important that Israel makes sure that it is the heart, that it is at the heart of this center, the axis of goodness. You're a very busy man, sir. In an unprecedented historic period, the law for national service is a very important one, and we need additional things. I mean, we're running out of time. We need an immediate release yesterday, not yesterday, 9 months ago, of all the hostages. I wish you the best of luck, because your success is our success. We will act and we will succeed, God willing. Thank you very much.